So how many times is DraftKings going to fill a $300,000 contest until they realize they should have had like a $1.5 million contest? Every time you go into the lobby, they just drop another $20, $300,000. First one filled before 8:45 in the morning. I'm looking to get them in there. Sorry, this contest is filled. Then the other one filled. Now there's another one. Greg, how many are we going to get to? 3, 4, 5?
How many are we at now? 3? Is this the third one that's up?
I assume it'll be 3, but I mean, this has got to fill too.
It probably will. I'm going to go with 5 as my final answer here for this. I'm going to go.
No, there's not going to be. I was just kidding. It can't be.
I'm going 5. I'm going 5. Final answer.
Well, we're less than an hour away.
5. They're going to go 2 more. 2 more.
Dude, it's so crazy because here's the funny thing. They have the Millie Maker wasn't intended for this slate. All right. So the Millie Maker was intended for a single Monday Night Football game, right? That was already posted. They already, started to fill that. But then the postponement for the Bills game gets moved, and they're like, oh, well, we can't just close this contest out. We've got to do something else. They do 100K to first. Just gone like that. Well, we'll do another 100K to first. What can it hurt? Gone. Ideally, after the first one closed, they really should have just done like a 300K or a 500K to first. They probably 300K to first. They would have filled it if it was 30K up to or 30% up top.
I think I know what happened though. So clearly the contests are missized. Like there's no doubt about it. So they've filled it, more than once, and they've got it going, more of them in the lobby. But they saw yesterday's slate overlaid. Right. So yesterday's slate, which was supposed to be the 3-game slate, stuck as a 3-game slate, but it was really confusing with some of the timing, which we have going on here as well, trying to schedule stuff out and confusing everybody involved with the different slate times and the different starts of different shows and whatnot. And I've had to get different people on different things because somebody's available for the original show time and then they're not available for the new show time because the game times changed and whatnot. And I think the DraftKings just looked at the slate that overlaid yesterday and like, we don't want another slate to overlay. So they just went really conservative, undersized it, filled ridiculously quickly. And then they're just like, you know what, at least we don't have overlay. We'll just post more of them as we go. If it fills, we'll just post another.
Sure. I wonder though, how much of it didn't fill because people didn't feel like dealing with a game being on the next day and everything like that.
Probably pretty high. And I think people also just being confused about what the games actually were. And maybe also people think like, hey, the weather is shitty in Buffalo. What happens if I play players from the Buffalo Steelers game and then the game gets pushed back another day? If they change the time, do my players take zeros? I do think there was a lot of confusion involved in all aspects of this. From like scheduling purposes for the football season, for scheduling and DraftKings trying to post contest stuff. I think that people just didn't really know exactly what was going on.
By the way, they filled all 3 of those. So that's $900,000 right there. And now they're about to fill another $100,000 25K to first snow day special. So there's your million. There's your million. Yeah. Could have done it. Could have done like 400K up top or something like that, 300K, but that's okay. Look, a lot of big prize pools today. And then Showdown, you've got the Millie Maker as well. Happy to be with you guys for Live Before Lock. On Martin Luther King Day, a little holiday action for football and for basketball. If I could ask humbly 1 single second of your time, take it and hit that thumbs up for us. It's greatly appreciated, goes a very long way. And subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 100,000 subs. Help us get there. It's been a long way coming. The DFS space isn't as growing as quick as the betting space. We hit 115,000 followers on the Odd Shopper channel, and we've been around for less than half the amount of time. It's just the way of the world. But you're here because you love DFS. We're here because we love DFS. And it actually is a pretty fun slate, man. Like outside of Mason Rudolph, you have Josh Allen as a 10-point favorite. You have Jalen Hurts as a 3-point favorite, but still Jalen Hurts and the Eagles with no A.J. Brown. And then even on the other side, Baker Mayfield going up against an Eagles secondary that, unless they've miraculously fixed some things over the last 7.5 days, that has been the most dog shit of dog shit defenses we've seen in football.
Yeah, I mean, they've gotten diced up by everybody as of late. And it's not even like they've been playing good competition against bad teams.
Yeah.
The Eagles have struggled. So it started with the game against the 49ers, which totally understandable to struggle on defense and lose to the San Francisco 49ers. But then some of the subsequent games, it's like really getting run over by the Arizona Cardinals, by the New York Giants, who had to make a quarterback change midway through the game. And I know that wasn't a game where the Eagles were, like it was a very competitive game they played against the Giants, but the Giants switched to Tyrod Taylor during the game. And even though the Eagles came away with a win, they looked terrible in the later stages of that game there. So even the games that the Eagles have been competitive in, like you've come away with them being like, this is a team that drops down my power rankings if you had them.
Exactly. I've been fading them in the betting space for the last month. How could you not? But today might be a little bit different. Not to mention, there's only 2 games to choose from. This isn't like a betting angle, right? This is also one of these instances, Greg, where even if you think one thing might happen, you're still going to have lineups that likely play towards a different outcome, and we see that in showdown slates all the time. Like there's no doubt about it. I'm going to have some Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It's just the way it is. Josh Allen is a turnover machine. He's turned the ball over 22 times this year. It's a 38.5 point total, frigid temperatures at Orchard Park. Just because I think the Bills win, just because they're 10-point favorite, doesn't mean, you outright fade the Steelers defense. Or from a matter of fact, no matter how bad Mason Rudolph and that offense is, like I'm still going to have a decent amount of Najee Harris and probably sprinkling in some George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and Jaylen Warren as well. So look, we went game by game for the strategy show, Ben Rossett and myself. I say you and I just talk about the games, talk about the positions, and help set everybody up, put them in a good spot heading into 4:30.
Sounds good. And then also, I've got lineups built here for DraftKings, for FanDuel, for Showdown contests. So if you guys are watching in Discord and you have access to Stochastic package, which gets you access to Discord, you can hit me up over the course of the show and we'll talk about some of the questions you guys have. So anything you guys want to talk about related to today's football slates, whether it's FanDuel, DraftKings, main slate, Showdowns, throw us questions about that and we could hit on all of it here. So yeah, I agree, Loughy. We could go all around here.
Larry said, I guess Loughy got his power back. Yeah, dude. Had a 2:30 show yesterday and my power went out at 2:30 on the dot. Like Jordan's about to count us down. And yeah, went out. So it is what it is. Then they're like Tuesday by 11 p.m. it should be back. And I texted you, I was like, this is not good. But it came back 3 hours later after we packed up everything and went to my brother and sister-in-law. So we're good, man. We're good.
And you had to get the kids all ready to go, the newborn. I felt really bad for you.
We have a Jeep Grand Cherokee, right? 2 rows, not 3. It's me and my wife with 1 kid on 1 car seat, the other in the other, and a 70-pound dog, 70-pound pit mix in the middle. And she's not having it. Like she's trying to get up into my wife's seat to sit on her lap. Good thing the drive was only like 5 minutes, but yeah, it sucked. Anyway, we got football. So enough of me, enough of that. I want to start off at quarterback and kind of dive into this situation because I ran the Sims earlier and I will say I was not unhappy to find, right? And we'll talk our own opinions here. We'll talk the Sims. We'll blend everything together. Many of you are already Sims users yourself, so you're probably getting similar results. I was not displeased to find that, believe it or not only was I not getting any Mason Rudolph, which I'm okay with, because I am getting a decent amount of Pittsburgh exposure. It's the way things break. But you're talking about a 2-game slate where you have Josh Allen, you have Jalen Hurts, and quite frankly, even a hobbled Baker Mayfield in this matchup is in a pretty decent spot. I was getting almost a third of each of those guys.
Yeah, so that would make sense if you don't get to any Mason Rudolph and you get to like a third of the other guys that we're getting that we have as options on the slate. One thing that I am pretty curious about is what ultimately the field ends up doing with Jalen Hurts, because right now we have Jalen Hurts projected to be the most popular quarterback on the slate. If you run stuff through the Sims and the contest generator and whatnot, I think there's a very strong chance that people look at the recent performance of the Eagles and just say, you know what, Jalen Hurts, the Eagles are struggling. AJ Brown is out. And people are saying if they're going to spend up for a quarterback, they'd rather go to Josh Allen than Jalen Hurts. So while the ownership is similar between the two of them right now, I do prefer Jalen Hurts. And I think there is a chance that the field doesn't want to get to him and that lowers his ownership a little bit just because of how much the Eagles have struggled. But also to your other point, I agree with you. I don't get to Mason Rudolph. I only get to Josh Allen's, Jalen Hurts, and a Baker Mayfield.
Interesting. You think it could have that much effect on the field's ownership?
Relatively. Right. So not to the point where like Jalen Hurts is, 10% owned or anything like that, but it could have an impact in terms of when you look right now through the contest generator and build lineups. Jalen Hurts shows up as being the most popular quarterback on the slate. I'm not sure that actually ends up being the case, though.
Okay. I was talking to Ben and making a point this morning that I think, you could definitely see something where Jalen Hurts just, I won't say take the training wheels off, but they've clearly limited his rushing ability outside of those terribly stupid designed like draw plays, right? Where he just gets crushed at the line of scrimmage. I think you could see him in must-win game in the postseason running more than usual. And obviously Josh Allen too. Ben made a good point. He's like, even statuesque, like not non-mobile quarterbacks run more in the postseason because you're doing everything you can to pick up a few yards. That is the X factor with Jalen Hurts. If he can run, then it mitigates so much. The other thing with Hurts, and the reason I think that like so many people will just continue to go back there is because you get the ball down to the 1 or 2 yard line and it's just an auto touchdown from Hurts. And he didn't throw all week in practice up until Friday. They said he looked good. We'll take him at their word that he looked fine. Jalen Hurts going out. I'll say this much. I can't speak for the field. I can't speak for you. If he's out there on a 2-game slate where what's my recourse here other than Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield or Mason Rudolph? I'm just going to go into this one working under the assumption that like, okay, this offense can function because it's easy to remember that Giants game. It was embarrassingly bad. And then the game before that against Arizona, they lost, but they still put up 30 points of offense. So, AJ Brown's out, but you still have Devontae Smith. You still have Goddard. You could argue that double stacks are far more appealing than they normally would be when you have 3 main weapons to choose through. And you also have actual value this week. Like it's not fun value. Julio Jones, Olamide Zaccheaus, Quez Watkins. But there is something there that in previous weeks never would have existed.
Yep, for sure. It's definitely true. And ultimately, what I'm really saying here is that I prefer Jalen Hurts to Josh Allen if I'm spending up for one quarterback because other things that are in play as well, Josh Allen playing in the bad weather game, not as bad today as it would have been yesterday had they played that game, but it's still going to be suboptimal weather conditions, which is why this game has a fairly low total. So in terms of the quarterbacks, to me, it's Jalen Hurts from paying up for somebody. If I was just playing one lineup, Baker Mayfield, I'm going to save salary, definitely makes way more sense than Mason Rudolph does.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when it comes to Josh Allen, 0 issues getting to somebody like Josh Allen here. And the more he turns the ball over, it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually hurt him because, they're just going to have to throw more. I also don't expect cold temperatures or anything like that to make any significant difference in how often they pass. We've seen them in horrible windy games where Josh Allen still throws 40 times. It means nothing. But you look at that offense too, though, and now you're talking about a team that has no Gabe Davis, the real hero of the postseason. We've seen that multiple times over the past couple of years. Stephon Diggs, whose price has come down quite a bit, as it should. And then Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Khalil Shakir, his price tag came up $1,000 since yesterday. Just looking at some of these stacking options, I think if you're looking at, and I want to get your thoughts here because people already heard me talk about this earlier in the day. When you're looking at Mayfield, where you have Chris Godwin, you have Mike Evans, Cade Otton, Palmer, you can throw into the mix as a cheap play. You have Rachaad White, who's a very capable pass catching back against what has been a paper mache defense. Eagles stack makes a lot more sense. It's easier to get to, less expensive than it's been. And then the Bills stack without Gabe Davis becomes a little bit more condensed, give you more value options. Do you have a preferred way to play this, or are you just kind of spreading yourself out?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and look at all of my exposures. And when you're asking me spread out, do you mean in terms of the kind of stacks I'm getting to, the quarterbacks between Allen, Hurts, and Mayfield? So like what do you mean by spreading it out?
What I mean is, do you have a true preferred stacking team? Like I know you said Jalen Hurts, but looking at it outside of just the quarterback, right? Because let's not forget, we have 2 mobile quarterbacks here. If you're talking 2-game slate, a lot of times these onslaughts can be very effective. Do you have a preferred method to go?
Yeah. So for that, if I'm going for my actual stacks, the team I'm stacking the most, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the reasons that you had mentioned right there, where we do have some value on the low end that's coming to us from the Eagles, where it's, like Quez Watkins in play, Julio Jones, guys that we didn't consider for the entire year, but it's because they had AJ Brown there. Somebody's going to have to pick up extra targets now. So then if you look at where we want to spend up for with some of our pass catchers, I do think some of the guys that make the most sense. And by the way, this also applies to Rachaad White at running back today. But as far as pass catchers go, Chris Godwin's a really good option. Mike Evans is a really good option. So if I'm going to have a lineup that is Mike Evans, that is Chris Godwin, that is Rachaad White, yeah, I want the quarterback in the lineup to be Baker Mayfield. I don't want it to be Jalen Hurts or to be Josh Allen. So since so many of the skill position players that I like are from Tampa Bay, the team that I actually stack the most, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, it feels that way. And I'll tell you what, whether you feel good about it or not, my stack exposure, when you're looking at like QB +3 spots, it is more Baker Mayfield than anybody else. Now, that doesn't mean more Baker Mayfield than any other quarterback, but more of like the big stacks, the QB +3, or God forbid more, is going to be Baker Mayfield in a spot like this. There's no real significant rushing upside. Last I looked, his rushing prop was 10.5 yards, but let's just assume for a second, right, on an abbreviated slate, that the Eagles defense still stinks. I know they get Darius Slay back, but struggle in the middle of the field. Just linebackers have been brutal for that team. Chris Godwin can carve them up. Mike Evans is just a monster. I mean, if it's Mike Evans at times against James Bradbury, it could get ugly quick if they're not getting pressure on Baker. Cade Otton, Palmer's cheap. Rachaad White has pass catching upside. And the only way Baker gets there, you pointed this out, the only way Baker gets there is if it's through the air.
Correct. Whereas, and another thing too, so not to get like too far ahead of ourselves with other parts of this conversation, but if I had lineups in the Sims that were showing up as Jalen Hurts with DeAndre Swift, like that's not a lineup combination I would want. I try to weed some of those out because so much of what you were kind of alluding to there, if Baker Mayfield gets there, it's going to be throwing the football. If Jalen Hurts gets there, it could be from throwing the football, but it's most likely going to be because he gets 3 1-yard rushing touchdowns, because there seems to be a magnet at the 1-yard line in every single Eagles game where everybody gets tackled at the one, and then it's Jalen Hurts tush push for the score. So I do think there's a pretty strong negative correlation between Jalen Hurts and DeAndre Swift. Whereas when it comes to Baker Mayfield, I view him as positively correlated with Rachaad White. Like you mentioned, he's somebody who's capable of catching pass and run routes out of the backfield. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, all these guys are going to be positively correlated with Baker Mayfield. That might not be the case with Jalen Hurts, in particular the running backs, if there are going to be so many situations where the Eagles are looking to run the ball when they're 1 or 2 yards away from the goal line.
Right. And it's funny because DeAndre Swift is going to, like, he gets goal line opportunities. It's just Jalen Hurts usually finishes them. And yeah, you're right. By the way, can those two coexist in a good lineup? They can. It's definitely possible that they can, right? We've seen it happen before. But what is the likelihood? And that's a tough one for sure. Nick said Loughy, Oregon Trail. I assume you're talking about me packing everybody up and traversing, 2 miles down the road. Funny though. Do you watch TV? Do you watch any shows?
Yeah, I've heard of the television.
You're familiar. Okay.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the TV. So the last time I actually watched a recurring show on TV though was House of the Dragon. So it's been a minute since I've watched something like ongoing on TV. Honestly,
dude, that might be one of the last times I've watched. I just haven't. Not much good is out there anymore to begin with. But I watched 1883 a few weeks ago.
Okay.
He mentioned the Oregon Trail. I mean, that's what this is, dude. Check that out. It is sick. I'm big into like Western stuff and American history. Oh man, that'll get your juices flowing, Greg.
So, what's funny is because I forget the guy's name who created the show, but he was a guest on Rogan's podcast the other day, and I listened to some clips of it, and he was pretty interesting, and it did make me want to check the show out.
By the way.
Sorry,
what
was that?
Sheridan.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, I had heard of the show, but it wasn't that, like, I didn't know it was about the Oregon Trail or anything like that. I did play the Oregon Trail back in the day in elementary school, where for some reason that was something we would do. It was supposed to be educational. You'd sit in school and you'd play the Oregon Trail and just be like, hey, you died because everybody got hungry. And then we're supposed to learn something from that or whatever. But yeah, I would check that out for sure.
Dude, you should. Look, Wind River, he was behind that. Hell or High Water might be my favorite movie ever. He did that. Everything he touches is good. So check it out. Check it out. Check out Hell or High Water first. Get back to me. I've been trying to get people to watch that forever. Let me know. Anyway, back to football here. I think we covered a lot from a stacking perspective. What about running backs? Because when you actually dig into this position, there's only one actual timeshare. Now, if you wanted to be like, yeah, well, Buffalo, who the hell knows what's going to happen with Buffalo, right? And to be fair, we don't. I get that. I believe Fournette's still on the practice squad. Like, he's not with the team, but Ty Johnson's there. Latavius Murray is still there. He was just a healthy scratch last game. So we'll see what happens with Latavius Murray. Is Latavius Murray active? We should know.
I'm fairly sure Leonard Fournette is not active.
No, Fournette, I think, is still on the practice squad.
And Latavius Murray. I'm trying to look for him on Twitter, and then I realized that it's very hard to spell Latavius.
No, it's not.
It's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible. Nobody's been able to figure this out. But
CJB in chat said Murray is active.
Okay. So Latavius Murray, either way, Latavius Murray, like, he's not going to have any kind of real significant impact on the 2-game slate because he's not somebody we should be getting to for that anyway. Ty Johnson showed up in one of my top 150 lineups. But if we're looking at the running backs, I know you're getting at where it's which guys are actually in timeshares. And the way I'm looking at it, relative to the ownership on the slate, I don't really want all that much to do with Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren because I never know what to make of the Steelers running back situation. Between the two of them, Jaylen Warren I consider to be the one who's the more talented of the two. But if the team is going to constantly give Najee Harris more of the touches than Jaylen Warren, and if he's going to be playing more snaps, getting more carries and all that, it's really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around the idea where both these guys are going to be like 30+% owned. It's going to be a timeshare, whereas we've got other running backs like DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Rachaad White. I think we can feel fairly confident that those are, for the most part, going to be the guys in the offense. You mentioned Ty Johnson. Sure, he's going to get some touches, but barring injury, James Cook is going to be the guy in the backfield there. So I would really like to build my lineups around White, Cook, and Swift, especially when you consider that Harris and Warren have pretty comparable ownership to Swift.
They definitely do. The only thing when it comes to Najee Harris is going to be, if this team is capable of keeping the game competitive, it has to be like outside of Josh Allen turnovers, it would have to be the Najee Harris massive workload. I mean, that is the one thing that keeps me coming back to him, particularly over Warren, because Harris's last 2 games, both let's keep in mind, both must-win spots, right? And also spots, to be very fair here, that they did not get behind early. Against Baltimore, they were playing backups. So Tyler Huntley and backups everywhere. Against Seattle, they got that win on the road. That was surprising, but they played with a lead. He had 26 and 27 carries, respectively. Last week against Baltimore, Najee Harris had 26 carries and 5 targets, 5 receptions, 31 total touches. So I think I'm probably a little bit higher on him than you. Look, I hate trying to guess between these two guys. It sucks. There's no doubt about that. But in the same breath, it's like, okay, if the game does stay within arm's reach, the Najee Harris workload with Mason Rudolph at quarterback could be huge.
Sure. Negative game script for sure. Something that works against it for me. We've got, the Bills favored by right around 10 points in this game. To me, it's largely because I feel better about the workloads of the other 3 running backs. And I think they're all better than Najee Harris and in better game script. DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Rachaad White. And this also is going to, I'm going to tie in. We got a question in Discord from Captain Akella Loughy, who asked us who our favorite single entry play is on the entire slate. My top projected ROI lineup in the Sims is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers stack. In lineups that are Buccaneers stacks, which I like quite a bit for tonight, I really like DeAndre Swift as a running back because what you're doing is you're giving yourself a lot of leverage here where it's not only are you going to be stacking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which means you don't have Jalen Hurts in that lineup, but one of the more likely ways that Jalen Hurts fails is the same way that DeAndre Swift fails, which is if Swift scores the touchdowns, I don't think Jalen Hurts is the best fantasy game. If Jalen Hurts scores the touchdowns, I don't think Swift has the best fantasy game. So if I'm going to be stacking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a single entry lineup, I would be more apt to get to DeAndre Swift at running back because that lineup already isn't going to contain Jalen Hurts. So to Captain Akella's question, and also running back who I'm most overweight to of any of the core running backs we have on the slate, the one I'm most positive leverage to is DeAndre Swift. That makes Swift a single entry play I like quite a bit.
Interesting. All right. So you're most overweight to DeAndre Swift. Now, is he your highest owned running back, or are you just most overweight to his projected ownership?
Most overweight to his projected ownership. So my actual most rostered running back in my top lineups right now is Rachaad White, but he's so popular. He is the most popular running back on the slate by a fairly wide margin. So just being, if you have 70% of Rachaad White, like an insane amount of them, you're barely overweight to the field. 70% of Rachaad White isn't as overweight to Rachaad White as 50% of DeAndre Swift is going to be overweight to DeAndre Swift.
No, absolutely. And, you know, just thinking about this too, I mentioned it on the 11 o'clock show. You do see this quite often. The Bills are a great example. We can talk about James Cook here, kind of tie it into DeAndre Swift. You remember last year, and I think even the year before, you know, you had Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, James Cook. And Devin Singletary's role was kind of in flux all season long. But then they got into like the end of the season, and then they got into the postseason. And this is just one example or one game. But teams do this where they go, you know what? Okay, now that we're in the postseason, we're actually going to lean on the guy who is the best in our backfield. And if that happens to be the case today with DeAndre Swift, let's not overlook the fact either that this Tampa Bay offense, I say all these bad things about the Philly defense, but this Tampa offense has been dog shit for several weeks now, right? Like they scored 9 points against Carolina last week in a must-win game to get into the postseason. They just happen to be lucky that Bryce Young is operating, you know, the worst offense that we've seen in years. But they 9 points against New Orleans, 13 points. They really stalled out. Baker, I don't think, is 100% healthy. If that happens to be the case, and this just ends up being like a war of attrition type game, and we assume that Hurts isn't 100% either, do we see a situation where DeAndre Swift comes into this spot with like a legitimate 20 plus carries?
Could be. Could definitely be within the range of outcomes that we end up seeing that happen here with DeAndre Swift. But most importantly, too, is if you build lineups in the contest generator, run them through the Sims tool, and then you go ahead and look at what some of the exposures are to the individual positions that are expected to be by the field. You've got DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, all around that 30-ish mid 30% mark in terms of expected ownership by the field. Then you've got James Cook. He's in like half of lineups. And then you got Rachaad White in 2/3 of lineups. So just considering all that information, I view Swift as the most reasonable guy to get overweight to there. And then also what you had said too, is if this is a spot where maybe Jalen Hurts isn't 100%, maybe Baker Mayfield isn't 100%, we could see Philly lean on DeAndre Swift a little bit more than they otherwise would have.
By the way, guys, while DraftKings had like all of these contest closing, Owner's Box still 29% yet to go on their main 25K wildcard kickoff, 5K up top. If you're not there, I know many of you are. I saw a comment earlier today on the strategy show. Someone said in our chat that he was up $11,000 and ended up like towards the end of the last game last night, ended up losing money, which is just the worst feeling in the world. I'd rather climb the ladder any day than get knocked down a rung every single time a play happens. But if you're not there yet, links in the description and in chat. You've seen a ton of overlay there, not just for NFL, but for NBA as well. Up to $500 first match deposit bonus on Owner's Box. When you sign up and deposit with the link that we have, no promo code necessary, even if it asks, just the link, and turn off your ad blocker to get you there. For some reason, ad blockers are weird with this, but you can turn it right back on. Not only when you sign up, do you get up to $500 first match deposit bonus, not only do you have pretty awesome super flex contests that haven't been filling, which is essentially free money, that's tossed back into the contest, but you're getting free contest tickets as well. A $5 DFS contest, a $5 lightning lineup contest. I think only $10 deposit as well. So over there, you're already making your money back plus whatever you're matched up to and the overlay. So still some time. If you've got your DraftKings FanDuel lineups in, head over there. If you're already on Owner's Box, make sure to get some lineups in before that. Well, if it doesn't fill, which it very possibly won't, it's at 71% and we're 26 minutes till lock. Check it out. Links in the description and in the chat. All right. So I wanted to ask you about James Cook, and that's kind of the way we set up running backs here was, all right, you have Latavius Murray, you have these guys, you have Josh Allen, who's, essentially their best goal line back. But James Cook, also someone that coming off that massive game in week 15 against Dallas, where they ran 1,000 times, didn't throw the ball, been insanely quiet since then. But it's not like the volume hasn't been there. 20 carries, then 19 looks, then 17 last week against Miami. Where do you prioritize him among Rachaad White, DeAndre Swift, and Najee Harris?
Yeah, so he is overall in terms of exposure to me, like kind of neck and neck with DeAndre Swift. Once again, the running back I overall get the most of is Rachaad White, followed by James Cook and DeAndre Swift. But I'm a little bit overweight to James Cook and then more overweight to DeAndre Swift, considering that he is projected for, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10% or so less ownership than James Cook. So James Cook is a very strong option to me for a couple of reasons. One is for sure the game script. We've got the Buffalo Bills are pretty big favorites in this game, which sets up well for James Cook to be running out the ball in the later stages of the game. And then also his workload has just been much more significant in the second half of the season than it was in the first half. So earlier in the year, we were seeing games where James Cook would be 12 carries, 15 carries, 12 carries. A game against the Jaguars, we had 5 carries. Then if you look at his last 4 games of the regular season, 13 carries and 3 catches, 16 carries and 1 catch, 20 carries, 25 carries and 2 catches. That was a career high for him in terms of touches. So all the workload we're seeing going to James Cook, it's a positive game script. Then also, if you look historically at NFL game scripts, when the temperature starts to drop, teams are a little bit less apt to throw the football. They're a little more often to run the football. I know the conditions are much better in Buffalo today than they were yesterday, but it doesn't mean that they're optimal conditions for playing football. And that is something that generally leads to teams running the football a little bit more than they otherwise would. So I do think it's reason to expect a little bit more touches for James Cook and then potentially a couple extra rushing attempts for Josh Allen as well. But yeah, I view James Cook as being a very strong option at running back.
Yeah, no question about it. And you know what? There's really not a lot to choose from here. I'll ask you this. How would you prioritize these guys then? How do you prioritize the position today? If you're someone playing like 1 to 3 lineups.
Yeah, so if I was playing one lineup, it would probably have Rachaad White, James Cook, and DeAndre Swift all in it, right? I'd have 2 of them in the running back spot, and then one of them being in the utility spot. And the guy in the utility spot, it would be either DeAndre Swift or Rachaad White. Doesn't matter which one, but just to give yourself the most flexibility possible with the player in the later starting game in the utility spot. As far as players relative to ownership, while I do have the most overall exposure to Rachaad White, if I was just building one lineup and can only play 2 of the running backs based on my exposures relative to field exposure, my preferred choice would be go to James Cook and DeAndre Swift if I only wanted to play 2 running backs. But White, Cook, Swift, those are the preferred options for me. Harris and Warren, if you're playing a bunch of lineups, right, it's a 2-game slate. There's no way to just write off both Warren and Harris, but individually I get underweight to both of them.
I'm looking at a wide receiver position that has no A.J. Brown, and then you've got Devontae Smith, who's clearly going to be popular. Just looking in our ownership right now, we have Devontae Smith as unsurprisingly, one of the highest owned players on the slate, as he should be. Right, because you have him and Dallas got it. When you take A.J. Brown out of that offense, things begin to look a whole lot different. But the price dip on Stefon Diggs is significant because this is a guy that we kind of haven't wanted to pay for recently. Do you have a way of saying, all right, you know what? I like this guy more. I like Mike Evans more. I like Godwin more. I like Devontae Smith more. Because to me, I think so much of it is just dependent on the type of build that you have in these games.
Based on where I'm stacking, and the game that I really prefer stacking, this should not be a hot take to anybody, Eagles, Bucks, I view that as a better game to stack than the Steelers, Bills. And that's for multiple reasons beyond just, the weather situation. A big part of it is that one of the teams out of the 4 on the slate is a very, very shitty football team with a bad offense and is Mason Rudolph at quarterback in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't want to do a full game stack with Mason Rudolph being one of the quarterbacks in one side of the Bills-Steelers game. So as a result, based on what you had just asked me there about some of the top-end wide receivers that are prioritizing, Diggs is my least favorite of all of them. Partially, it's due to the game environment. And the other part, too, is just how my lineups are being built. I'm prioritizing that Eagles and the Buccaneers game. So when I look at my wide receiver exposures, it goes Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, and then Stephon Diggs is the fourth of those guys. They're clearly all in play, but that's my order of priorities.
This is where it gets difficult because, by the way, I love Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith. I have no problems with Stephon Diggs, but you're right. It kind of is just like a casualty of the slate in a sense. You're still going to get to a lot of him. Are you okay with stacking Josh Allen in non-Diggs, like not having Diggs in Allen lineups?
Yeah, for sure. So actually the lineup that I had played or that I have in play right now for single entry, the one that was the Sunday through Monday slate. So it was the 2 games yesterday, the 1 game today. It actually does have Josh Allen at quarterback in that lineup and doesn't have Stephon Diggs in it. There is a lot of other value as far as the Buffalo wide receivers go. Like I think Khalil Shakur is a good option to look at. I think that Dalton Kincaid is a good option at tight end. So you could definitely stack lineups that have Josh Allen, have cheaper options as far as the skill position players go, and then just spend up for some guys in the other game on the slate. So for the 2-gamer today, it is a little bit different than the 3-game slate from yesterday. So Diggs is a little bit higher of a priority, but no, I don't have any issue making Josh Allen lineups that don't have Stephon Diggs.
I'm with you. I have no problem with it at all. And look, we've seen that work quite a bit. Are you okay with like Josh Allen's single stacks though on a 2-gamer because of his rushing upside? Where are you drawing the line with some of these? Because the QB +4 on a small slate is one thing. QB +1 is another thing where it makes it kind of difficult, but you do have 2 rushing quarterbacks.
It is still really hard to get to a quarterback with only one of his stacking options.
Very hard.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the main reasons being is it's a 2-game slate, so you don't mind having position players against your defense. But at the same time, too, you don't want to be playing a defense with like 4 players from the opposing team going up against it. And there's just only so many lineup combinations you can make if you're single stacking a quarterback that isn't just like full on stacking against the defense you're playing. So for a slate that's only 2 games, I don't like to build stacks unless it has generally at least 2 of the skill position players paired with the QB.
Yeah, I'm with you. And not to, it's so much easier to do today than it has been with some of these guys. Like without Gabe Davis, you're getting a cheap Khalil Shakir. Dalton Kincaid isn't all that expensive. There's just, and with the Eagles, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert is what, $4,800. You have other cheap options there. You had the question earlier was from the Discord.
Yeah.
What I want to dig into a little bit more is value. And this is a question people always come up with. I'm sure people in chat are wondering the same thing. When it comes to value plays here, I think we could agree largely, and I'll get to these super chats in a second, but I think we can largely agree that running back position doesn't have much unless you have some firm take on Kenny Gainwell that I'm just completely missing out on. There's not a lot there because you Chase Edmonds and Latavius Murray and Ty Johnson, those are pretty ugly spots. And you know, you're drawing to a touchdown, but then even if you have that, you're probably going to need a bit more. At wide receiver, though, it looks a little bit different because no AJ Brown, no Gabe Davis, that immediately opens things up. And then you have a relatively discounted Pickens and Deontay Johnson. You have Palmer on Tampa Bay. How do you approach all the value at the wide receiver position? Because that's the only place you're going to find it, really.
For sure. And I totally agree with what you said at running back too, because short of an injury at the running back position, none of these guys are going to, in all likelihood, have a massive game unless, you know, it's like Kenneth Gainwell has 3 carries and just one of those carries happens to be like a 50-yard touchdown run. The backup running backs, they're kind of drawing dead on this slate. So the place you do want to be spending or the place you want to be saving money, it's either a wide receiver or tight end because the tight end options also aren't all that great. So if we look at some of these wide receivers here, I think that we have to be looking most at the Philadelphia Eagles situation where we don't know who the guy is going to be that's going to draw more targets in the absence of AJ Brown, but we can feel pretty good it's going to be somebody that runs more snaps and gets more targets. And that's where I start to look at guys like Quez Watkins, like Zacchaeus, like Julio Jones, none of which are projected for all that much ownership. We've got Jordan has pulled it up on screen here, and you guys will see that there's none of these punt options are projected for much more than 10% ownership. So with that being the case, if you guys are only playing 3 lineups, 5 lineups, if you just have Quez Watkins, Olamide Zacchaeus, Julio Jones in 1 out of 5 lineups, you're well overweight to all of them. And I don't know which one it's going to be, but I feel pretty good that one of these guys is in line to have a pretty significantly decent game. My preferred option is Quez Watkins.
Okay. Yeah, Ben and I went back and forth on this morning because I was saying that, as gross as it is, excuse me, the Julio Jones touchdown equity is still kind of there. Like, we saw 2 touchdowns in the end zone, or 2 targets in the red zone that went for touchdowns a couple of weeks ago. I'm not convinced that his snap count goes up all that much, but I do think when you're missing a big body receiver in AJ Brown, that Julio Jones could be a guy they look to once they get in the end zone or in the red zone. And it's a lot more difficult to do that with somebody like Quez Watkins. Now, Quez Watkins, more of a vertical threat, can't track a ball to save his life, but he's been in the system for a while. He knows the offense and all of that good stuff. It is tough between him, Olamide Zaccheaus, and between Julio Jones. I think all of them have their warts for sure. I'd say Julio Jones is probably the likeliest to get blanked, but if you said which one of those is most likely to score a touchdown of the 3, I'd say it was Julio.
Agreed. And we saw a game, what was it, 3 weeks ago, where he actually scored 2 touchdowns where they were actively targeting him in the red zone. So we've seen it before. I do think there's good touchdown equity. One thing I will add that's a little bit different. So for DraftKings, I think Quez Watkins is the best punt wide receiver. For FanDuel, I think it's Julio Jones because of the touchdown equity you just mentioned. And on FanDuel, where it's only 0.5 points PPR, the touchdown matters a little bit more. So if I'm punting with a wide receiver, Julio Jones on FanDuel, Quez Watkins on DraftKings, though.
We had a couple super chats. Nicholas Lynn, I'm simply here to atone. I did some excessive sinning this weekend. Thanks, dude. Thanks. Appreciate you. Yes, atone for your sins. Hit that thumb. Take 1 single second. Tap that thumbs up and atone for your sins on Live Before Lock. We had another one, I think, too. Let's see. Hold on. Chris Williams gifted 5 DFS YouTube memberships. Appreciate you, man. James Magruder, best 3,800 or less player for utility. Okay, that plays right into what we were talking about here. I think there's a few of them. Like we said, you don't get cheaper than 4K at running back, but I don't think you want to go there anyway. Palmer's 3,400. If this Philadelphia defense continues to struggle like we've seen, that's a somewhat viable spot. Cade Otton, if you're looking to go double tight end, is viable. And then, I mean, what do you look towards outside of that? Do you look to a Zaccheaus?
Yeah. So if it's
Quez is 3,700 too.
Yeah, and what was the price point he gave us?
3,800 or less.
Yeah. So for 3,800 or less, got that ownership up on screen as well. I'm going to be most apt to answer Quez Watkins here. If you're just playing one lineup, plugging in one guy for cheap, let's go Quez Watkins on DraftKings.
Okay. Eric Johnson with a super chat. Funny story. Oregon Trail was created by a couple of college kids here in the Twin Cities, and none of them made a dime off of it. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. But they got paid in other people's pleasure. How about that? By the way,
the best way to be compensated.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, the best way to be compensated is BetMGM right now because they're giving you $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Guys, I know it's a DFS show. I understand that. And I know we're up against it with Lock. Bookmark the link in the description or in chat, or just click it, have it up on your browser for after Lock. You can bet tonight, you can bet tomorrow, whatever you want. You bet $5, you get $158 in bonus bets. It's that simple. If you lose your bet, you get 158 in bonus bets. You could make 11-leg parlay. Normally, I wouldn't recommend that. Win that, get paid out on your winnings, and still get $158 in bonus bets. So worst case scenario is you lose your initial stake and you lose all your bonus bets. And at the end of the day, you're down $5 and 2 minutes of your time. So yeah, if you're into free stuff and free bonus bets, $158 worth to be exact, and you're in a legal sports betting state, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You know what I mean? That's money you didn't have before. You got to be 21 years or older to do so. And if you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. But yeah, link in the description and in chat. Takes a minute to sign up. Get 158 in bonus bets on a $5 bet. Win or lose, doesn't matter. And you only have to deposit $5. There's no catch. All right. So we've covered a lot in the last however many minutes. I'm pretty impressed with ourselves. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit us up in Discord or in chat. And I want to talk a little bit about tight ends, unless you have anything else at wide receiver to get into.
So one thing I did want to hit on, we had one other super chat from JB Hughes 2012. He wanted us to do a sim for the Steelers Bills Showdown game, which I've got run here in front of me. So I just wanted to read off for JB's question here, just some of the players I got the most exposure to help him build out these lineups really quickly before we got to lock. So first, starting with the exposures I got to, I just want to tell him who I had the most exposure to in the MVP spot on FanDuel. So the MVP exposures that I had the most of running everything through the Sims, James Cook, overwhelmingly the MVP play I got the most of. He's actually in nearly half of my lineups where he's only projected for about 10% MVP exposure. What all the field is doing, Loughy, which I understand why they would, for the Bills Steelers game, we have 60% MVP ownership on FanDuel, expect to go to Josh Allen. If you go to anybody else in the MVP spot, you're going to be building a different looking lineup. So James Cook, overall, the MVP that I like the most, and then some core options that I got to in the flex spot. That is going to be Josh Allen. If I'm going to have Josh Allen not in the MVP spot, I still think it makes a lot of sense for FanDuel. So like him more in the flex spot, and then other guys as well. If I have to roster one of the running backs, which you do kind of have to do for the Showdown slate, I prefer Jaylen Warren to Najee Harris, and then some other pass catchers I was getting exposure to. Dalton Kincaid being one of them, and then the other one, Stephon Diggs, I was getting into some lineups as well. But I hope that's like a good overview to help you get some groundwork laid for your lineup there, JB Hughes. Just want to make sure we hit on that. So sorry to cut you off, Loughy.
No, not at all. I'm glad you did, because it's a milli maker. And the reason it's a milli maker, I saw some comment, is because they didn't think there was going to be 2 games. They thought it was just going to be a single game slate with a milli. Appreciate you hanging out, Kobe. You're the best too, brother. You guys all are. We still got a few minutes to go, though. Still some time to get things done. Jordan, what I'd love to do here is throw the Sims tool up, because Greg and I have done this before, and some of the lineups that have been on the screen have ended up making just a lot of money. And of course, our dumbasses did not play them. However, we've had some good success with that. We had a guy win the owner's box contest in the parking lot after a softball game. I've mentioned it many times, right? Just literally just plugging it in his sitting in his car with 1 foot hanging out the door. Put up the best lineups for DraftKings. Let's just sort by Sim ROI and see what we get here. I want to sort by Sim ROI and see what we get. While you do this, I want to just point a couple things out. EMAC in the chat. What's up, EMAC? Is at the tight end position, I am getting an exorbitant amount, and I think this is the way it should be. I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm getting different with many other different types of builds, some strange builds. But at the tight end position, you have Dallas Goedert with no A.J. Brown. You have Dalton Kincaid, who I think the return of Dawson Knox taking away opportunities has been overblown. Look at routes run. Look at targets since he came back in week 14. It's just head and shoulders. Dalton Kincaid ahead of Dawson Knox. The only thing that changed is his snaps came down, but when he's out there, he's getting targeted and he's running routes. That's all I care about. But my Dalton Kincaid and specifically Dallas Goedert ownership and Cade Otton, they're all up there. Once I get past that, I have trace amounts of Freiermuth, Dawson Knox. It's largely all of my exposure going to Goddard, then Kincaid, then Cade Otton.
Makes sense. And maybe I shouldn't be that surprised, but we're getting to a ton of double tight end lineups here. One of the easiest ways you guys want to mute that a little bit, because I don't feel great about the tight ends on the slate, is you could do an equal negative ROI boost to all of the tight ends here. That will weed out some of those double tight end lineups. I do think some of them are viable. I don't know how much I want to load up on like Dalton Kincaid and Cade Otton in the exact same lineups here. But yeah, I think that the tight end exposures in terms of the order we have these guys here totally makes sense. And especially Dallas Goedert being the overwhelming top option to get to, because he's the guy who I do think stands to gain the most as far as targets are concerned for the Eagles in the absence of A.J. Brown. I think that the rapport we've seen in the past with Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts, I think that could really, really benefit them in this spot. And earlier in the year, it wasn't the best start to the fantasy season for Dallas Goedert. They really need him tonight, though.
For sure. We had a super chat, Palmer or Otton. Palmer's really interesting, but I still would lean Otton here. It's an Eagles team, again, in the middle of the field. They truly struggle. This guy plays almost 100% of snaps. again, that can be misleading if you're not targeted all that often. But I still prefer K Dotton over Trey Palmer. Do you have a lean there?
Yep, K Dotton for me as well. And I see Jordan's plugging into a player compared to, and I'm going to guarantee that our data prefers K Dotton. Yeah, it does.
By the way, player compare tool, you're right. Of course it's going to. Player compare tool is free. 1v1s, 2v2s. You can see all of that too. Projection, ownership. It's a pretty awesome tool. Like if you're not around to watch a live show or you don't feel like super chatting us, the player compare tool on Stochastic on our website is 100% free. Malcolm, for the Eagles Bucks game, who for captain? All right. I feel like there's a million different good captain options for that showdown slate. I really do. Because you're talking about Devontae Smith or Dallas. Here's what I'll mention to you guys, because I know it's not a showdown show. They released this before AJ Brown was ruled out. So Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert are priced with AJ Brown being in. And my God, that throws some stuff off for sure. So if I had to guess, and I haven't looked, but I would have to guess that Devontae Smith is getting a ton of and it hurts all the time too. But I would think just with the mispricings there, not knowing that Brown was going to be out, you're probably going to see a lot of Devontae Smith at captain.
Yeah, so I've got I've lineups built for every single different format on both sites for today. And by the way, Owner's Box, which sponsors the show, we've also got all data for Owner's Box to the sim tools as well. So let's see. As far as my captain exposure goes for DraftKings, the guys that I get the most of here, and the one that I'm most overweight to on the whole, is Chris Godwin. Godwin only expected for single-digit ownership in the captain spot. We've got three guys that are expected to pick up the bulk of the ownership here. And Jordan, if you sort by the pool ownership there on the right, pool ownership, but for the captain, then you'll see there's only three guys that I really think are going to pick up any kind of meaningful amount of exposure here. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Rachaad White. So those are your popular guys. Anybody beyond that I consider to be fairly contrarian. The one that stands out the most to me is Chris Godwin, because he looks like he's going to be really underrepresented here in the captain spot. And yeah, we're kind of seeing that in this sim that Jordan ran too. I mean, we've got 11% of them in top 150 lineups compared to 8.6% pool exposure. So that's my favorite tournament guy to roster in the captain.
By the way, Sims Tool half off throughout the entirety of the postseason. Every slate, showdowns, main slates, and you get the PGA lineup simulator, brand new for the upcoming week of PGA contest, including those Friday, Saturday, and Sunday PGA contests. So sweeten the pot a little bit since there isn't much football left. Just letting you guys know. Greg, Gage, can you do Diggs 2V? Dude, go to stochastic.com. I'm telling you, it's free to do the. I mean, Jordan, if he wants, can throw it up, but it's totally free if you want. What was it? Diggs and Watkins versus James Cook and Julio. Do you have any guesses? Do you have any guesses?
Let's see. So it's Diggs and Watkins.
I'm going to say Diggs and Watkins.
Yeah, I'm going to say Diggs and Watkins as well. Let's see, though. I'm also trying to think what this. Oh, it was James Cook. Though also the one on the left uses more salary by a pretty decent amount. Oh, closer than I thought it was going to be.
Marginally, yeah. There it is. But you look at the projections there. We have Julio projecting a little bit better than Quez, but he's also more expensive. So it's really, yeah, okay. That's real close, actually. Real close.
I lean towards the Diggs and Watkins side, but yeah, you got yourself a coin flip there. But 50.4% to 49.6. So if we're going by the data and you have to pick a side, one side wins ever so slightly more than the other. But it looks like you've got yourselves a pretty even 2v2.
Hey guys, I hope you have a great rest of the day. Great MLK day. Win some money today. Some money. And Greg, that's about it for us, man. We got 2 football games on a Monday afternoon. Final Monday games of the year.
Last Monday, last 2 Monday games, so no more Monday night shows. unless another game gets postponed and totally fucks up my schedule on the weekend and we have to redo everything
which is
again.
possible.
Which we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening with the weather. But yeah, this is it for Monday football games. If it's not for any kind of unforeseen weather circumstances, no more Thursday night football, but we got Saturday slates, we got Sunday slates, and of course NBA as well. So tonight we're gonna have deep dive live before locks. We'll be breaking down the basketball slate tonight for MLK Day. If you guys want to check out those shows.
Appreciate you guys. Good luck today. And remember, follow Greg at G Ehrenberg DFS. I'm at Loughy_D on the Twitters. Jordan Klein, as always, we appreciate him. We'll see you back here for the next one. Peace.